Welcome back to Alberta Primetime and the nightly Vocal Point. Now, from sifting through the budget for the impact on justice to Albertans taking the law into their own hands. Let's hear now from the Wednesday Crime Panel in studio, defense lawyer Rod Gregory, youth justice advocate Mark Charrington, and in Calgary tonight, the Herald's justice and social issues reporter Jason Van Rassel. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Hi, Michael.
All right, guys, several points in the budget that warrant some discussion tonight. Jason, I'd like to start with you, and to start with the elimination of the Safe Communities Innovation Fund. This apparently represents about $20 million of the $44 million being taken out of justice. By the same token, though, Jason, this program was set to wind down, was it not, at the end of this year? Was the writing not maybe on the wall?
You're right in one sense that it wasn't a surprise. We knew that the Safe Communities Innovation Fund was coming to an end. It funded about 88, 90 community pilot projects that were meant either for crime prevention or crime reduction. I think what the big question was whether they were going to find it within their wallets and within their hearts to continue it. There was a lot of speculation that perhaps the government would. The Safe Communities Innovation Fund was actually a real pet project of Premier Redford's when she was the Justice Minister. So there was a feeling among some that this was certainly a program that had some political backing. Clearly, though, the government had to make some tough choices, and crime prevention's gone by the wayside. I think we all know that this was going to be a tough budget. I was a little surprised, though, that there wasn't at least some funding for crime prevention. When you're talking about a combined budget that's over $1 billion, and crime prevention only makes up about 1% of that, you think they could have found a little more. Obviously, I wasn't the guy that was drawing up the budget and making these decisions and looking at it, from the perspective of an outsider. But it seemed a little surprising for me that really there wasn't more in there for crime prevention.
Mark, you're a huge proponent of that program.
Extremely.
How big's the impact?
Well, it's going to be huge because all these programs are going to wind down pretty well at the same time, and it's going to leave a huge vacuum. There's a significant number of programs in Edmonton that are dependent on that funding stream. UCAN and other agencies that provide vital, critical services for crime in the area of crime prevention. And with this being taken away, I mean, we're going to have this big, huge void of programming and resources to really address the systemic issues of criminal behavior. I mean, we have lots of programs right now that are going to be winding down March 31st and have to deal with, 13, 14, 15-year-olds that are just starting to get into criminal behavior, and we were, veering them away. Now we don't know what we do, and we need something sustainable. I've always said we need something sustainable in the area of crime prevention, and pilot project and these sort of on-again, off-again funding streams just aren't cutting it.
Rod, $2 million being thrown, not a whole lot of money, but $2 million being thrown at court services. But as a bit of a trade-off, could be losing up to 6 courtrooms. How do you read that impact?
Well, it's interesting, the juxtaposition of the provincial government saying they're releasing a big secret report about why this one sexual assault case in Airdrie was stayed, and they're going to make their report public, and then they're closing courtrooms. There are courtrooms in this province that have 18-month delays, and they're talking now about, well, we're going to streamline certain types of cases. They should have been doing that ages ago, and the judges, the prosecutors, and the defense lawyers really work towards creating programs to divert people who should not be in courtrooms. All of that has been erased with this budget, and we've gone completely backwards. So if you're on AISH, you do not apply for legal aid because you make too much money. So we want cases that should be in the courtroom to be in the courtroom. And so these budget cuts are they're ridiculous. And we've taken such a hit. Restorative justice, all of the programs that Mark's talking about put us back 25 years. So we want to be a progressive, free, democratic society, but we're just erasing all of that in one fell swoop.
Mark, you alluded to one particular program, Teens, a youth group home that is about to end, close its doors on March 31st. The Justice Minister has said it's not the result of the budget. Is that how you see it as well?
No. My opinions is, I mean, this is my opinion. I think it has a lot to do with budget. I mean, it was underutilized, but I think that there's certain core programs that you expect for all Albertans. And you know, I never thought I'd be here on this stage arguing why a jail should be kept open. But this was, you know, when you talk about what the Youth Criminal Justice Act is about, reintegration, rehabilitation, how women are disproportionately under-resourced in this area. And what we're doing is we're closing the open custody beds, all of the open custody beds in Edmonton for girls. And so this isn't just servicing Edmonton, but also central and northern Alberta. So girls from Wabasca, High Prairie, Grand Prairie, they're going to have to now, if they get an open custody disposition, go all the way to Calgary. And you're talking about a lack, you're tearing them from their supports, from their families. It's going to be, you know, in my opinion, it's inhumane and it's cruel and unusual what we're doing. And so we need certain critical resources sprinkled throughout the province. And by just shutting this program down, which is, I guess, $600,000 a year, which isn't a lot of money in the big picture of things, I think we're doing a big disservice. And you've got to realize that these young people are in jail because they commit violent offenses. These girls need rehabilitation, they need reintegration, they need all the supports that we can put at them so they don't graduate into the adult system and become, you know, much more dangerous people.
All right, lots of budget talk. Up next, Ottawa makes changes giving you more power in making a citizen's arrest. More with our Wednesday crime panel after the break. We're back with the nightly Vocal Point and our Wednesday crime panel. Albertans looking to make a citizen's arrest have a bit more leeway now, as you no longer need to catch someone red-handed. It is thanks to changes in federal legislation that came into effect Monday. Rod, before these changes, how much of a concern was it in taking the law into your own hands?
I don't think the law has really changed that much with these amendments. They're minor. And I think there's a general consensus that the self-defense provisions in the criminal code are confusing, to say the very least. And not to be self-deprecating, but I did a jury trial where we had to give input about which self-defense provisions applied. I got it wrong, the prosecutor got it wrong, and it got appealed. And so they're confusing for everybody. So these ones, you know, they don't really say specifically what you can do. I don't think they really change much. They seem to give more leeway to a private citizen, but I'm not sure a private citizen couldn't have done what they could have done now, what they could have done before. I don't think really much.
Does it put you in a precarious position?
Well, I don't think it's really that precarious. I think if people act reasonably, there's an objective test to self-defense, they're going to be fine. So there's a little bit of an expansion here, but it's still pretty vague, I think.
Jason, should we expect a rush of Albertans heading out to look for citizens' arrests?
I'm not so sure. I think it's laudable that the government's trying to lend some clarity to the law. Rod certainly paints a picture of how successful that may or may not be in the end. But, you know, I think to a member of the public, this is really kind of an arcane thing. You know, we have people who are probably inclined to act and lend a hand when they see somebody in trouble. We have other people that are inclined to look the other way, and we have people that maybe are concerned but won't act themselves but will give 911 a call instead. And I don't think, you know, any kind of window dressing change to the law is really going to change how people act.
Mark, your thoughts?
Well, I just agree with Jason and Rod. I think that it's not going to, in the greater scheme of things, it's not going to make much difference to the security guard at Shoppers Drug Mart when he sees a 13-year-old start pocketing some makeup. I mean, you know, people by and large act pretty responsibly and reasonable. No one likes to use excessive force. No one likes to, you know, hunt down people. And I really think that it was just to try to score some political points. Personally, I don't think it's going to really, here or there of life and crime and on the streets is going to make any difference.
Okay, we have time for one last topic. A bid to abolish the death penalty in Montana has been defeated by state legislators, leaving some to wonder what that means for Ronald Smith, the former Albertan, on death row for the murders of 2 men in the early 1980s. Jason, you're writing about this in the Herald today. Had that bill actually passed, would that done anything for Mr. Smith's clemency application?
There's some really considerable debate about that, contentious debate, and a lot of people don't think that you could retroactively apply the abolition of the death penalty to somebody who's already been given a death sentence. But there was some debate. Some members of his defense team thought that that was certainly applicable. I think where this really comes into play with Ronald Smith's ultimate fate is that he has this application for clemency that still needs to be decided upon by the governor of Montana. His name's Steve Bullock. So if you think about that for a second, if Montana had abolished the death penalty, that would probably change the political climate in which Governor Bullock would be making that decision. Do you still condemn a man to death when the state has basically said that this is a cruel and unusual form of punishment? Now, what we have instead is the state reaffirming, and actually reaffirming for the 3rd time in recent years, its support of the death penalty. Will that have an influence on Steve Bullock? Only Steve Bullock knows, but certainly it does change the political landscape, and to my mind, doesn't really make for an optimistic outlook for Ron Smith. Now, the other thing in play, though, is that there's still a civil lawsuit that's challenging the execution protocol in Montana. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, has said that it's cruel and unusual punishment. They won that case, and now there's a lot of debate about what to do with the execution protocol. Bottom line is Ronald Smith isn't going to be executed anytime soon, regardless of what just happened in the legislature.
Rod, where do you put Ronald Smith's application for clemency now?
Well, I think the longer this drags out, the worse it is going to be for him. So I agree with Jason. The fact that the state legislature would not abolish capital punishment, I think, is a real signal that there's going to be pressure on the governor not to grant clemency. So I think once the civil rights actions weave their way through the courts, I think he's probably going to be executed ultimately.
Mark?
I'm glad we live in Canada.
Gentlemen, insightful as always. Thank you kindly. That's defense lawyer Rod Gregory with us tonight, youth justice advocate Mark Charrington, and justice and social issues reporter Jason Van Russell with the Calgary Herald.